large-scale social activities and functions. It can also be used for after-school programs and financing or maintenance, and generating an annual expense for private children or income-generated placements in the swimming sport. It will also be accessible for recreational purposes. Maintenance. Through the Tenant Association, associated fee for swimming classes, pool parties, etc. Water treatment plant serves to provide space for the recycling of water captured by the rooftop for purposes such as irrigation in the agricultural fields, laundry, showering, and supply to toilets. This will in turn reduce the complexity on the water supply from Wasco and the overall cost of water treatment. East of the housing complex houses, agricultural space, which tenants can use for farming, and storage space for the building. Single bedroom apartment. Overall dimension, 25 feet by 22 feet 6 inches. Total surface area of 525 square feet. Bedroom dimensions, 12 feet 6 inches by 10 feet 2 inches. Surface area, 128 square feet. Open concept living and dining kitchen space, 12 feet 4 inches by 21 feet. Surface area, 264.91 square feet. Bathroom, 7 feet 9 inches by 7 feet. Surface area of 34.25 square feet. Porch, attached to bedroom, 12 feet by 5 feet 9 inches. Surface area, 57.75 square feet. 2-bedroom apartment unit. Overall dimensions, 35 feet 2 inches by 31 feet 6 inches. Surface area, 1,085 square feet. Bedroom 1 dimension, 13 feet 9 inches by 13 feet 8 inches. Surface area, 187.70 square feet. Bedroom 2 dimension, 13 feet 9 inches by 12 feet. Surface area, 165 square feet. Open concept living, dining, kitchen space, 15 feet 3 inches by 35 feet. Surface area, 525 square feet. Bathroom, 8 feet 6 inches by 7 feet. Surface area of 59.5 square feet. Porch, attached to living area, 14 feet by 6 feet 6 inches. Surface area, 78 square feet. Porch, attached to bedroom, 12 feet by 5 feet 9 inches. Surface area, 57.75 square feet. 3-bedroom apartment. Overall dimension, 28 feet 5 inches by 31 feet 6 inches. Surface area, 1,488 square feet. Bedroom 1 dimension, 13 feet by 12 feet 6 inches. Surface area, 162.75 square feet. Bedroom 1 half dimension, 8 feet by 7 feet. Surface area, 56 square feet. Bedroom 2 dimension, 13 feet 9 inches by 13 feet 8 inches. Surface area, 184.47 square feet. Bedroom 3 dimension, 13 feet 9 inches by 12 feet. Surface area, 165 square feet. Open concept living, dining.
ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alex George Jr. I'll be the moderator for this morning's event. Just ask you to bear a little patience with us as we await the arrival of the Honorable Prime Minister, and then we make an immediate start as he arrives. Thank you. Point, may I also invite you to continue to stand as we invite Mr. McLean, who is a member of the staff of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, to lead the invocation.
Good morning. Let us bow our heads as we pray. Our kind and merciful Father in heaven, we are eternally grateful for the breath of life in our lungs this morning and for being able to gather here for this occasion. Lord, as we come, we first ask that you forgive us for all of our sins, cleanse us from any unrighteousness that may be within us, and we ask, dear Lord, that you help us to be forgiving of others as well. We pray, dear Lord, that your blessing be upon the proceedings today. You know that we have great aspirations for this event and for the future. I pray for a blessing upon all those involved in putting together this event, and we ask that whatever the outcome is, dear Lord, that we would be satisfied that we have given our best effort. May your Spirit continue to be with us and hasten the footsteps of those who may be still on their way. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please remain standing. Thank you very much, Mr. Clem Jean-Pierre. My apologies on the name. Member staff leading us in the invocation. We will now have the an instrumental version of the St. Lucia National Anthem played at this time. you very much. And I now have the pleasure to ask you to please sit at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Calix George Jr., and I'm also very pleased to have as my co-anchor for this morning's event, Dr. Cordelia Ambrose, and of course she is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, to the 2022 Finance and Investment Forum on Affordable Housing put on by the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation. Honorable Philip J. Pierre, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Development and the Youth Economy, the Honorable Richard Frederick, Minister in the Prime Minister's Office responsible for Housing and Local Government, the Honorable Emma Hippolyte, who I believe has stepped out briefly, Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs, Permanent Secretaries who are present from the respective ministries, Ambassador of the Republic of China, Taiwan, His Excellency Peter C.Y. Chen, and he's accompanied by Third Secretary Ms. Elsie Tsai, Mr. Ignatius Jha, Chairman of the Development Control Authority, managers of financial institutions and credit unions, representatives of Corporate St. Lucia, members of the Bar Association, members of other professional bodies, including, I believe, of course, the St. Lucia Institute of Architects, the members of the board of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, staff of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, Ms. Christine Dixon, Caribbean representative for Green Growth Planning and Implementation of the Global Green Growth Institute through the OECS. Other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this event, which we believe will be impactful in addressing the matter of housing affordability in St. Lucia.
Thank you, Mr. George. Good morning, everyone. Today's forum is a historic one in that it brings together critical stakeholders who are going to create an avenue to ensure that St. Lucians are provided with affordable housing. But even to welcome you further, I invite the Chairman of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, Dr. Mikey Pilgrim, to welcome you. Mr. Pilgrim.
The Honorable Philip J. Pierre, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Development and the Youth Economy, the Honorable Richard Frederick, Minister in the Prime Minister's Office responsible for Housing and Local Government, the Honorable Emma Hippolyte, Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs, Permanent Secretaries in the various ministries, the Ambassador of the Republic of China and Taiwan, His Excellency Peter C.Y. Chen, and Third Secretary Ms. Elsie Tsai, Mr. Ignatius Jha, Chairman of the Development Control Authority, managers of the financial institutions and credit unions, representatives of Corporate St. Lucia, members of the Bar Association and other professional organizations, members of the Board of Directors of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, staff of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, senior government ministers, officials, other distinguished and invited guests, media personnel, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning to you. First, I would like to commend the Board of Directors of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation and the organizing committee of this Financing and Investment Forum, and in particular, Ms. Catherine Seelys for the immense sacrifice that was made in ensuring that this event became a reality. In so doing, I would like to welcome each and every one of you for gracing us with your presence. Indeed, forums such as this one develop a greater awareness among institutional, public, corporate, professional, and individual players of the perspective in our need to implement government's policy and to harmonize energies in the marketplace in order to fulfill the dream of each family owning their home. I am pleased to see the wide range of professionals, financial institutions, including the credit unions, and other organizations represented here today. And perhaps one of the great achievements of these kinds of forums is developing a close relationship among the various human inputs into the home ownership process. It is our belief at the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation that families in St. Lucia wish to own a home, and there is little question that we have aimed at emphasizing home ownership when it takes the form of site and services, single-family homes, and now multi-family units. We also believe as more private resources are directed to serving the home ownership aspirations of our population, the less people will have to be served by the government safety net, and the implications for the public purse is obvious. Government over the years have done its part. Now the time has come to invite the financial institutions and prospective investors to participate and adopt policies so that the maximum benefits are passed on to potential homeowners while still enjoying a reasonable rate of return on their investment, whether by direct injection of funds and by way of mortgages. I now come to the vexing question as to how can we deliver affordable housing to those most in need. One of the most interesting and creative developments in housing finance will be the use of the marketplace as a source of capital for the affordable housing. Without going into any great detail, I would like the financial institutions to consider the following methods of financing for affordable housing. 1. Mortgage-backed securities. 2. Index-linked mortgages. And 3. Insured lending. I particularly favor the insured lending mechanism of financing, since insured loans are very attractive investments for financial institutions because they represent high-quality assets with no risk. For these reasons, lenders would bid vigorously for them, and this results in affordable housing projects getting mortgages at favorable interest rates. The above three methods of financing all bring benefits to affordable housing projects as they result in lower operating costs and less demand for tax dollars. In our present environment, government spending is restrained, and with the worldwide shift to reliance on private sector solutions to society's problems, I am convinced the future will bring even more market involvement in affordable housing on the basis of public-private partnerships. Why is the provision of adequate housing so important? Housing is important for several reasons. First, at a basic level, it provides shelter and protection. Second, housing provides the occupants with their own space and territory. Third, housing allows or should allow community interaction. In addition to the social benefits just referred to, housing carries significant economic benefits. For example, housing construction constitutes an important component of total investment and therefore of economic growth. Housing construction is typically labor-intensive and therefore a significant employer of both skilled and unskilled labor. During this session today, the Ministry of Housing, in collaboration with the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, will give you a full view of a variety of digital concepts for the various housing projects now being contemplated for your understanding and appreciation, in the hope there would be market acceptability, which in turn would encourage financial institutions and prospective or potential investors to join with us in making the dream of ownership a reality. We have a cadre of experienced and well-qualified managerial and technical personnel with a wealth of institutional knowledge and memory, headed by a young, energetic Chief Executive Officer who together are determined and excited to deliver affordable housing to the people of our country. If we succeed in this undertaking, we will not only make St. Lucia a nation of homeowners, we will ipso facto develop a middle-class society, which is important for the following reasons. The middle class has proved to be the engine of growth in our country. The middle class will be the magnetic force that will draw the poor and the underprivileged to changing their status in life, thus aspiring to be part of this class. The saturation of the middle class in our country would assist greatly in the reduction of crime and the deviant behavior in our society. If by the grace of God, we are able to achieve the above combination, I can confidently say today, there will never, ever be an uprising or a revolution in this country. In closing, I would like to emphasize and bring to the fore that we are a people of tremendous talent and ability, as you will soon discover from the digital presentations by young, ambitious St. Lucians who are eager for the opportunity to contribute to their country. This is the desire, and we are obliged to assist in whatever way practical. The time for action is now, and I hope that all in attendance will be sensitized to the need to bring affordable housing to the people of St. Lucia, thus fulfilling our dream to make St. Lucia a nation of homeowners. I thank you, and may God bless everyone present today.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Pilgrim, the current chair of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, and of course, a former Prime Minister and a former Minister for Housing, for sharing with us your personal vision as well for the future of affordable housing. And of course, you spoke to that important issue of that St. Lucian dream. We quite often hear of the American dream of owning a home in the suburbs and having, of course, 3 children and a dog and 2 vehicles in the yard as well. And of course, that American dream is becoming even more difficult today. And in fact, just today, I think you may have seen an Economist article which spoke to Wall Street getting into the suburbs at this point in time, buying up properties, and it therefore means that a lot of people can't even buy that home anymore. And so it really is vital in terms of public policy how those matters are dealt with from a financial perspective. And so I think you're certainly very spot on your contribution. Thank you so very much once again. Now to another Prime Minister, of course, the current Prime Minister of St. Lucia, and a gentleman who has represented what may sometimes be considered a working class constituency, that of Castries East, for 25 years this year. So I think he deserves a little bit of a round of applause for that. And of course, a constituency which no doubt wants to be regenerated, to be seen in new light and to breathe new life all around St. Lucia. And I'm sure he has his own, very own perspectives on the matter of housing as a significant changer of the social condition, but in extension to that, of course, the economic condition as well. And so I'd like to invite at this time to speak, to address us, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I heard the Master Ceremony speak about the St. Lucian dream. This morning on my way to work, I heard a guy on the talk show criticizing me heavily for having a St. Lucian dream. He said I should, people live in Martinique and get 55 euros a day, and they work in St. Lucia for $50 a day, and I should be ashamed to have a St. Lucian dream. But in the life of politics, there are all opinions, and I haven't survived for 25 years because I didn't listen to different opinions. Good morning, Minister Richard Fredericks, Minister Emma Hippolyte, Ambassador Chen, Chairman of the Housing Corporation, other members at the table, Permanent Secretary, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to see so many people in this room today, investors, bankers, architects, people of High Wolf. If I can quote Joe Biden, St. Lucia is back. The people in this room this morning signifies that there is confidence in the economy of St. Lucia. And this confidence is personified in the fact that as we speak, there is a major hotel expansion going on in this country, the first for over 6 years. It's a confidence that manifests itself in the fact that we've tried and we are going to run a transparent, accountable government that will ensure that an investor gets a fair return for his investment, workers get a fair day's wage for a fair day's pay, and the country as a whole develops holistically. Every sector, every person will have an equal opportunity to get involved in the development of this country. This is not an easy time to be in government. Every sector. Technology. Unfortunately. But I tell you something, why is everybody so sad? Well, I know things are rough, I know prices, but everybody seems so tense. Is the mass or something? When I came in this room this morning, with all them bankers and rich people, I found everybody very sad. Cheer up, lighten up, lighten up. It's a very difficult time to be in government. It's difficult because for the first time, the world is being struck by a double whammy. A pandemic that stopped the entire world. And now a war that is not our fault, but has caused us to be in deep, deep trouble. St. Lucia budgeted in this budget $65 million to be collected from excise and fuel taxes. As we speak, we are in negative for $12 million. So instead of earning money, we actually have to pay money because we are subsidizing gas and we are subsidizing LPG gas. In fact, it was budgeted for us to make an average of between $2.50 and $4 on 1 gallon of petrol. As we speak, we're making 32 cents and 0 cents on diesel. And LPG gas is being subsidized by $22 on a 20-pound cylinder and $20 on a 22-pound cylinder. This is a state of play as it relates to revenue in the country. In fact, in the U.S., inflation is the highest that it has ever been for a very long time. And as we speak, we project inflation to be in St. Lucia to be at 6.5% this year. So it's a very difficult time. It's a very difficult time to govern, a very difficult time to run a country. And your presence here this morning signifies a confidence that together, collectively, we can make it. Together, if each one of us plays our fair share and each one of us understands that it's got to be a matter of shared sacrifice, St. Lucia will prosper and we will see through these difficult times. I have confidence and I have the faith that this will happen. So I thank you for being here with us this morning. I also want to congratulate the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation for putting on this investment forum. It's an idea which brings together the better minds, which brings together the people who are involved in the housing sector, people involved in finance, etc., so we can develop a partnership where collectively we can advance the interests of the country, and in this case, the interests of the housing sector. In our 2021 to 26 manifesto, we listed some areas most relevant to the private sector. And to refresh your minds, I will recall these areas. Stabilizing the economy to focusing on the housing sector as a key driver of economic growth. Expansion of the digital economy, removing impediments to e-commerce. Diversification into new and emerging sectors with emphasis on the blue, orange, green, and youth economies. Development of a new fiscal and economic strategy driven by the financial realities on the ground. And what we did is we shifted our focus on borrowing from short-term paper borrowing to longer-term instruments, because in the short-term instruments, the interest rate was extremely high. To sell our paper, our interest rates will have to be between 4% and 5% for a relative short term. So by shifting to longer-term instruments, then we have a better interest rate and we could share some gains. But these gains are being quickly eroded because interest rates seem to be rising rapidly. Interest rates are rising, so our gains, which we predicted, may still happen, but not in the magnitude that we expected it to happen. We aim also to revitalize the private sector with emphasis on access to working capital financing for business recovery, retooling, tax relief, and greater ease of doing business. And we fulfilled our promise on tax release and on tax relief, and I'm hoping that the private sector can take advantage on the generous concessions we have offered as far as taxes are concerned. We have removed all interest and penalties on all taxes due from the year 2000. All interest and penalties on taxes due have been waived. So we expect the business sector to embrace that opportunity and pay the outstanding taxes, which would help create an injection of money into the economy and allow the business sector to remove a liability from their books. We also have negotiated a loan of $10 million with the Caribbean Development Bank to inject in the private sector. And only last week, we completed negotiations with the EIB to invest money in the banking sector for small businesses and other businesses. So we hope that this injection of funds can manifest itself in the business sector. And as a first step, as far as housing is concerned, we've invested $10 million in a house repair program. And I want to make it clear that this house repair program, it's a repair program for vulnerable, for poor, for differently able. It's not a house building program. It's a repair program so that the people who are poor, who are dispossessed, who live in horrible and terrible conditions, they can get some relief. It is not a house building program. So it is very clear, and I want to make it clear. The $10 million is not to build new houses, it's to repair houses. And when houses have been built, it's because where these people lived, they lived in conditions, and we can't have a society where people live, where people sleep on the boats, where people sleep in boat houses. I mean, we cannot afford, we can't allow that to happen. So we must have a level of empathy We can't have a society where one sector of the country is developing rapidly and another sector is living in abject poverty. And this house repair program is to improve that for the people of the country. So I want you to understand, these are houses that you see on Facebook are not the houses that we intend to build for people to live. They are houses for the poorest of the poor in this country. And I can assure you, there are many people who need them. I was in my constituency yesterday, and I always say to technocrats and other people, you must live the life of the people that you criticize. I want to invite you next Wednesday to come to my constituency. All the bankers, everybody come. I will ensure your safety. And you will understand what we go through every day. You'll understand. So you must have a little bit of empathy. And the idea that these politicians, relax. Most politicians, and underline the word most, have good intentions. You would be aware that the NHC is the main government agency which is mandated to undertake business operations in housing development and to ensure improvements in the availability and quality of the housing stock in St. Lucia. Some years ago, the Department of Economic Development conducted a housing needs assessment which revealed that the housing deficit was about 11,400 units. To address this significant shortfall, the report recommended, among other policy measures, the need for government to bring together the housing ministry, the financial institutions, and the construction firms in a new constructive and workable alliance. In my 30th November 2021 address to the 155th AGM of the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture, I made the point that as a new government, returning to the economic status quo is not a viable option for us if we are to triumph and transform our economy post-COVID and now during a war. We must adopt a new approach that responds to the pressing needs of the workers, employers, parents, students, businesses, youth, vulnerable, and by large, all citizens of this country. I want to reiterate that this new forward-thinking approach underpins our broad economic and political philosophy of putting people first. Joined on this premise, it means, therefore, that our conversation today and going forward should be about the development of partnerships, which must be designed and deployed in a brave new approach to national development, where every citizen will benefit from the spoils of economic development and wealth creation. To this end, we have started to mobilize the necessary financial resources and partnerships, as evidenced today, to provide accessible and affordable housing for our people. This forum is a step in the right direction. As we embark on this new housing development initiative, let us ponder for a moment on the importance of a dwelling to an individual or to a family. We must recognize that the psychological desire to have access to proper housing, whether owned or rented, is one of the most basic and indispensable needs of a human being. In 1604, Sir Edward Coke declares that, and I quote, "The house of everyone is to him as his castle and fortress, as well as for defense against injury and violence as his repose." End of quote. Over the years, this famous statement has become simplified to "a man's house is his castle." As simply as it may sound, the profoundness of this phrase cannot be underestimated. It means that whatever the size or condition of one's home, it becomes the natural comfort zone. It is the only place where one should be guaranteed peaceful enjoyment, rest, and privacy, a retreat from the rest of the community and the world. As a society, if we embrace the notion that a house or home should provide that level of shelter, security, and privacy to people, then it will require some minimum conditions to enable the occupiers to live in comfort with a sense of pride in their dwelling. In addition to its basic requirement, there is a need for more climate-resilient accommodation. The reality of St. Lucia's geographical location means that we must build stronger and better houses for adaptation and mitigation of the threats posed by climate change. We need to better secure our citizens in their homes. My government intends to assist the low and middle income earning citizens with access to affordable, climate-resilient dwellings for our housing initiatives with the private sector. It is normal and acceptable in times of lagging economic growth for any government to stimulate the economy by embarking on a sizable public sector investment program, PSIP. In the case of St. Lucia, the PSIP capital projects usually contain construction of roads, public administrative buildings, community and wellness centers, hospitals. I want to assure you that in spite of the noise, work will restart on St. Jude Hospital this year. On the original St. Jude Hospital. On the original one, I said. Hospitals, public administrative buildings, community and wellness centers, airports, and seaports. And on airports again, we have to speak about Hiwanora International Airport. That is an entire conversation that I may need a bigger investment forum to deal with. But work on Hiwanora International Airport will continue. My government intends to pursue joint venture investments in residential housing with the private sector through partnerships with the National Housing Corporation. We are also moving ahead with the National Sites and Services Program based in the Housing Department to provide at least 40 lots to first-time property owners in PI, Lafag, Choiseul, Labrie, and Miko. In addition, through Prod Free, we have financed a new program for unplanned development, and we expect 1,439 households to benefit from this program, which will invariably lead to the repair of existing houses and the construction of new homes. These land developments and house construction related activities, together with the anticipated housing initiatives between the NHC, private sector construction firms, and financing agencies, will generate significant economic growth in the housing sector. The housing industry worldwide, and especially in developed countries, is known to contribute significantly to the growth and development of the economy. This is widely due to, among other things, the direct linkages which tend to exist between the manufacturing sectors of these economies and the supply chain requirements of the construction industry. In St. Lucia, the construction industry can contribute greatly to economic recovery post-COVID, despite the limitations of a low manufacturing base for construction material. Our analysis shows that increased activity in the construction industry will greatly impact the economy in many critical areas. It will create direct employment for tradesmen, artisans, carpenters, masons, plumbers, tilers, roofers, laborers, site supervisors, and security personnel, since most housing construction projects on island are labor-intensive in their execution, and also create indirect jobs in the subsectors of commerce, manufacturing, and transportation. It increases the sales of local and imported building materials and directly related services such as customs brokerage services, etc. It generates demand for trucking services to transport materials to construction sites. It increases the sales of hardware supplies, fixtures, furniture and appliances, and associated business activities. It generates additional government revenues from sales taxes, import charges, VAT, duties, land sales fees, stamp duties, and related transaction costs, and direct port charges to the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority. It enhances the investment environment and potential in the economy by generating additional businesses and revenue for lending institutions. For example, banks, credit unions, and professionals, including lawyers, accountants, and quantity surveyors. It increases job retention and productivity with the application of new technology. It addresses inequality in housing among the populace and promotes the enhancement of rural communities by providing an affordable and accessible housing stock for residents to continue living in their own communities and thereby reduce the urban drift. And the challenge for us is to be able to provide what is an affordable house. This is a challenge, and that challenge is complicated now with the increase in building materials because of the supply chain issues and the increase in interest charges. So an affordable house, which last month and in St. Lucia today, as we speak, a sheet of plywood, I think, now costs at least twice what it cost in January. Yeah. At least twice. I know that because in my constituency every day I have requests to buy plywood. And also, in our housing construction now, we have to deal with climate change and adapting to the hurricanes and extreme weather that will be more frequent. So a challenge for you and a challenge for us as a country is to develop what is an affordable house. Today, we are here to forge a structured, workable, and mutually beneficial relationship between the NHC and the private sector agencies to speed up the process of transformational change in the housing sector. We firmly believe that it's the government as the prime enabler of investment, creating the environment, and the private sector as the engine of growth, and if our shared commitment to providing great access to affordable housing for all St. Lucia, we can make significant strides towards meeting the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goal in housing. In closing, let me wish the organizers of this event, the NHC, and all stakeholder agencies and individuals in attendance a very productive dialogue. I fully embrace and support the activity, and I'm confident that through dialogue, discussion, give and take, shared sacrifice, we can structure a sustainable multi-agency mechanism to collectively mobilize our resources of land, finance, and human capital to fully utilize the investment opportunities that the housing industry presents. And so, we can gradually transform the housing landscape in St. Lucia for the benefit of all the people. Let us move forward, despite the trying times, in confidence, working together as partners in development for the advancement of the people of St. Lucia. I want to thank you and do have a very interesting forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for reaffirming a commitment to and an assurance to sustain economic resiliency, which is necessary to ensure that the lives of all St. Lucians is improved, as well as the delivery of this product. Today's forum has as its primary focus to create an enabling environment for the development and delivery of adequately affordable, safe, environmentally sustainable housing. To introduce this exciting project, this long-awaited for product, which will certainly promote property ownership and empowerment, please allow me to welcome to the podium the Minister with Responsibility for Housing and Local Government, the Honorable Richard Frederick.
Thank you very much, PS. I was urged to ask you to adopt the protocol, but it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge certain people within this august chamber. To my Honorable Prime Minister, we wish to welcome you and thank you for your speech, passionate as it always is, representing the constituency of Castries East. I do know that you are inundated with requests on a daily basis, but you navigate and maneuver very well. So I want you to give my Prime Minister, after 25 years, a round of applause. If you didn't do so, you would not have been re-elected so many times. Honorable Emma Hippolyte, my colleague, the permanent secretaries, members of the head table, chairman of the National Housing Association, the ambassador of the Republic of China on Taiwan, Mr. Peter Chang, and third secretary, Elsa Thai, Mr. Ignatius Jean, chairman of the DCA, managers of financial institutions, credit unions, representatives of Cooperate St. Lucia, members of the Bar Association. I see Petra Nelson to the corner of my left eye, other professional organizations, members of the Board of Directors of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, and of course the hardworking staff, senior government officials, other invited guests, media personnel, ladies and gentlemen. Today indeed is a historic day. It is historic because never before has the National Housing Corporation held a forum like this. And it is not often that one commences the delivery of an address by thanking any person or organization. This is normally done at the end. But I want you to permit me to break this trend, this usual trend, by thanking an individual whose brainchild this forum is. After Hurricane Ivan hit Grenada, the Grenadian government did not have the financial resources to proceed with the restoration of the massive damage that that hurricane had unleashed on Grenada. In that regard, the government of the Grenada held an investment forum like this to encourage private participation in the rebuilding process. It turned out to be extremely successful, and I am hoping that this one will mimic what happened in Grenada. Luckily, there was a St. Lucian in that room who was intimately involved and who at that time resided in Grenada as he was contracted by the Grenadian government as a consultant. When he called my phone, quite appropriately so, and informed me of his intention, or rather his thought of bringing the idea to the board, I embraced it wholeheartedly. He brought it to the board, and here we are today. In that regard, I want you to put your hands together for the Deputy Chair of the National Housing Corporation, Mr. Didas Fidi. Didas, if you're anywhere, please stand. Loads of times we see monuments, we are attending fora, we see huge buildings, we see appropriately poised everything, Madam Mayor, let me acknowledge you, sorry, and we fail to reflect on whose brainchild we enjoy at that point. So again, I want to thank Didas Fidi. Ladies and gentlemen, the housing shortage in St. Lucia is particularly acute. Cost of land acquisition is prohibitively high, and the task of construction does not create the zeal in the average St. Lucian to undertake such a demanding and challenging task. Most persons, because of that uphill battle, settle for not owning a home rather than dealing with this arduous task. This government elected on the mantra of putting people first, has mandated your humble servant to lead the charge in ensuring that the average St. Lucian comes first, by empowering them and ensuring that as far as we possibly and practically can, to permit the average St. Lucian to get their slice of St. Lucia. In fact, only yesterday at a meeting with some bankers, I was flattered as my PM was praised that Pip got the right man for the job. I want you to again give my Prime Minister a round of applause. In that regard, it is our policy as a government to cater for everyone as far as possible. We are busy under the Program for Unplanned Development, the meaning of the acronym PROUD, and the NSSP, the National Sites and Services Program, desperately trying to rationalize and regularize areas where persons have squatted in various locations around St. Lucia. We put in the infrastructure and then sell to occupants at a subsidized price. The virgin lots most times are sold at the cost of infrastructural development. So it is our quest, it is our desire to approach those who live in squatter settlements, still attempting to empower them. There are some St. Lucians, though not in the majority, who are still interested in building their private dwellings on their own lots. In that regard, we would soon be in a position to offer lots, additional lots, from various developments, including but not limited to Shock, Talvan, Balambush, Belvedere, Jackmel, and Larry Tret in Viewfort in the vicinity of St. Jude. So we will leave no one out. The squatter will not be left out. Those desirous of having their own plot and building their own homes will not be left out. But we must accommodate those who want to settle for neither of those. We have to significantly impact on the acute housing shortage. And because of that, we as a government at this time cannot undertake the construction of single dwelling units. It is in that regard the concept of a multi-story building that can house many families has been embraced. And whilst other concepts may be looked at and acted upon, if it is government's desire, and if those concepts fall within the category or the periphery of affordability, they too can be implemented. And that is why we have decided that the idea of furniture cannot be placed into those houses, into those homes, as it defeats the whole notion of affordability. Our Prime Minister constantly reminds us in Cabinet that 5 years is not 40 years. And at every Cabinet meeting, he pounds the words incessantly, implementation, implementation, implementation. If there is a Cabinet member who doesn't dream of that word, he has not attended the Cabinet meeting of Philip J. Pierre. In that regard, I have not seen the multiplicity of concepts, and we will embrace other concepts, but we need to focus and proceed with one in which we are far advanced. Being so advanced, we have already undertook costings. Those costings are nearing completion. The sad reality is, given the situation in which we currently exist, prices change almost on a daily basis. And last month, after the board decided to award a contract to do the costings, the drawings, electricals, and everything else. Up to this morning, I was informed, Mr. Minister, the prices have increased again. That is what we are faced with. But I am sure most of you will understand that the significance of July 26 should be to the forefront of your minds. And though it may sound ambitious, once our chairman of the Development Control Authority, who is here with us today, and we have the financial backing from your good selves who are here, once that combination materializes, we can start at least 2 of the first 4, if not all 4 of those buildings simultaneously. We are looking to start 2 in Cul-de-sac and 2 in Casabah. The land has already been secured and is vested in the National Housing Corporation. The concept of which I speak and which is on screen, some of you may have seen. As you will soon see, we will play the clip. It is a building that contains 53 condos of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom variations. What is extremely attractive about this concept is that it sits on an acre of land. If you were to subdivide an acre of land, 43,560 square feet, into lots, you would be successful in yielding only 7 lots at max, at very small sizes. As that same acre of land, from it must be left open spaces and space for interlude drains. So an acre of land in that regard would only satisfy the housing needs of 7 families at most. With this concept, not only will you house 53 families, it will sit on that very acre of land, and apart from the building, it will contain parking spaces mandated by the Development Control Authority as per the regulations for a building of such magnitude. Let's have a look at the building. Mr. Technician, can you play the short clip, please?
Construction work is expected to commence before year's end on one of the most ambitious and far-reaching housing assistance programs implemented by any administration in the nation's history to date. That's according to Housing and Local Government Minister Honorable Richard Frederick, who, along with District Representative for Castries South East, Honorable Joachim Henry, have been touring the proposed site earmarked for the multi-million-dollar development.
It is time St. Lucians get their slice of the cake. And wherever the apartment buildings are located, government will discharge its social responsibility, its social consciousness by not putting in the price of the land. You will be paying what the apartment costs. That is how we put people first. And so the average gas attendant can buy a condo for $100 and something thousand dollars.
The housing project, to be located in Cul-de-sac, will take the form of a multi-floor 5-story complex. It will encompass 53 1, 2, and 3-bedroom condominium-style apartments.
I believe the first multi-story building should start here in the currency of this calendar year. We are hoping that come 26th of July, the first year in office, that this government would have something huge to celebrate, because the government has done quite a lot. In fact, I was rather surprised when my colleague Musa enumerated the amount of good deeds that this government has done in 8 months.
The goal, officials say, is to break ground and start construction on the multi-story housing complex by July of this year. Community representatives have endorsed news of the project and say that they are eagerly looking forward to it getting off the ground.
Whilst our needs are diverse in this community, housing is one that is a great need. So I must commend the effort that we would think of the less fortunate in our community, in the constituency of Kashi Southeast, and at least the average individual, the gas station attendant, the supermarket attendant,
The bus driver
can afford a condo.
As long as we come in as NHC and we do the construction, we will leave the distribution or sale of the condos to the
local council.
The local council.
So that would allow the local council to be empowered and to grow.
Empowered and to grow, yes. And to basically target those, because there are loads of people, because I believe the prices are going to be right.
Yes.
The greed of some people may raise its ugly head.
Yes.
Persons who have a house may want a condo. And I don't think that's the way we should go. We should really look at the needs of the people. Council would be in the best position to assess that and to deliver to those we believe who are in most need.
The cul-de-sac housing complex is funded under the government's massive island-wide housing assistance program, which has been allocated well over $20 million in the 2022-2023 budget estimates.
Very well. So, ladies and gentlemen, this concept is Hurricane 5 certified. It is much quicker in terms of construction time and much cheaper. No block work will be necessary. No plastering will be necessary. No masonry finishing would be necessary. In fact, only this morning, I got a message and showed it to my Prime Minister that this building is slated to cost at least $5 million than the conventional blockwork building. And it can be built in 50% of the time. In half the time it would take to build a conventional building. This concept needs to be embraced and needs to be run with. I will not show let me just say we have the concept that we are going to use. We have a house, one house. There are several buildings in St. Lucia, but I will show you a house that was constructed in Peru, View Fort, using this new technology. Actually, he's on the team as the engineer as we move forward. Let's have a look at this, please. This is in Peru, View Fort. product. And ladies and gentlemen, far from St. Lucians being sidelined, the team doing the costings, and I see Jamal Antoine here, he's from the St. Lucia Institute of Architects, just raise your hand. Jamal Francis, sorry. Locals are the one doing the drawings. Locals are the one doing the costings. Locals are the ones that will submit to DCA, and locals must be involved in the construction. We will not sideline St. Lucians. I want to make this clear. So folks, this is the exact technology that we are going to start off using to bring relief to our people in a meaningful way. Surprisingly, Rwanda embraced it and have adopted that same approach in delivering 700,000 homes by the next 6 years, 2028. And the majority of those 700,000 homes fall in the low income bracket. Have a look at this 2-minute clip.
The government of Rwanda targets to increase the urbanization rate from about 18% to 35% by 2024 to support economic growth. The housing needs and demands will grow dramatically in the coming years. Welcome to Doing Business in Rwanda. In this episode, we'll look at affordable housing and how modern technology can help to scale affordable houses in Rwanda. I'll be your host, Tessie Carvin. A housing market study done in the city of Kigali in 2018 showed that 700,000 new houses were needed by 2028, 70% of which lay in the affordable housing category. The majority of those in need of housing are in the low-income cadre, and some require special housing programs to be able to afford decent housing. To address this problem, the government of Rwanda has been proactive in promoting the housing sector in order to achieve inclusive urbanization.
Like many countries in Africa or even beyond, Rwanda is working to figure out the best way to deliver affordable housing for people that earn low incomes. And so today's project that we've launched, which is a partnership for affordable housing, is one example of how a government like Rwanda's government can partner with the private sector to deliver affordable housing. And so what we did with this company is look at the whole process of getting a house at a certain price. So whether it's the land or cost of capital, all the things that are required for this project to become affordable, we worked with the company to make that possible. And the good thing with this company, they bring a very new type of technology that we don't have in the country, which is using light steel frames to be able to deliver houses. And what we see with this type of technology is it's more affordable, so it brings the cost of construction down, but it's also faster to deliver.
Yes, folks, more affordable, brings down the cost of construction, and faster to deliver. So, folks, when I first heard of this concept, I Googled it and found it at drive.google.com. It is no Trinidadian concept. It is no Malaysian concept. It is no Cuban concept or English concept. It is a new technological concept available for use by various countries. Now, before I speak on the bag of goodies that await bankers, investors, buyers, let me show quickly a 1, 2, and 3 bedroom floor plan of this complex. Well, okay. No, I need that looks good in cul-de-sac, eh? My God. Okay, this, okay, we have, this is what, 2-bedroom? This would be a 3-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, sorry. And give us the 1-bedroom, please. Those will be 1-bedrooms. So the complex would have 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. Now, ladies and gentlemen, and as my Prime Minister called you all rich people, I think I've shown you all you need to see. As it relates to ownership of those condos, we already have here, like the first world countries do, law governing the ownership of a dwelling within a larger building. The Condominium Act, used more in relation to condos for non-St. Lucians and extremely expensive condos, can and will be used for St. Lucians as well. In that regard, a buyer will have his or her title deed and would be in a position to sell or mortgage their dwelling as and when the need arises. In relation to the cost of those condos, the government has adopted a policy approach that in calculating the sale price to the average St. Lucian, the cost of the land will not be incorporated. So whatever it costs to put up the building, inclusive of administrative costs, government will give it to the St. Lucians at that price. We are here not to make a profit on our people, but to empower them and to ensure that these homes are affordable and lead to our people's upliftment. Why are you here, you may ask? You are here hopefully to participate with us. I urge you not to operate at a loss, bankers and investors, but to redirect your mind from profit maximization to discharging a social responsibility. Based on that approach, the clientele is huge, from the average gas station attendant to the bus driver, the police officer, the nurse, the fireman, and the list goes on and on. They all, I can assure you, would fall within the category of qualified clientele. So we are open to proposals which include but not limited to proposals to finance the construction of a building, 2 buildings, the buildings, and those proposals should include the interest rate and whatever period of moratorium on payments for and after construction, during and after construction. With that proposal, the National Housing Corporation will handle no monies, as the lending institution would pay the borrowed sum directly to the contractors. In that proposal, we at NHC will select the contractor through a tendering process. We can also entertain proposals to finance and construct. That proposal should include terms and conditions under which our partner will undertake the building, the financing and construction of the building. But we must ensure that that proposer has the skill set and relevant expertise to undertake that project. And they must, of course, ensure that there is a period of payment within that proposal after completion of the building. Invariably, the institutions that may wish to finance the buildings, 1 building, 10 buildings, will hold a first mortgage against the entire property, and we will agree beforehand that the proceeds of sale of any of the condos will go to the lender and will be dealt with on a pro rata basis agreed beforehand. Whilst we await the full costings, as I said, which seemingly fluctuate on a daily basis, we are hoping that by the time we receive proposals, there would be no significant departure from the cost. Those buildings are estimated to run in the region of between $10 and $11 million. If we go with the conventional block work, we are looking at 16.8 million. I look forward to the receipt of preliminary proposals from you, and we are hoping that those proposals can reach the NHC within 14 days, after which my board will deliberate and you will be contacted by a point person. That contact we are hoping will lead to contractual arrangements. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you for your attendance. I know that this is a very difficult time, but we are trying desperately as a government to deliver the mantra on which we were overwhelmingly elected, putting the people first. I thank you.
Thank you so very much, Honourable Minister Richard Frederick, for sharing with us this presentation. Of course, housing is a worldwide crisis. In fact, yesterday was African Liberation Day. And who would have thought that if we were seeing Rwanda 30 years ago, in 1994, a country in genocide, and now they're leading the way in so many areas, it is certainly astounding. And I do believe that the Honourable Prime Minister is going to be visiting maybe Rwanda for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, so hopefully he'll have a first-hand view of some of the amazing achievements that, well, maybe so, who knows. But in fact, I think from those houses, based on the prices that they were being proposed at in Rwanda, I think a one-bedroom house was working out to be about 43,000 EC dollars, and a four-bedroom, 225,000 EC dollars. Now, goodness knows that you can't get a four-bedroom house in St. Lucia for that price. So if, in fact, of course, anything even remotely double that in the case of St. Lucia could be achieved, then certainly that would be very, very commendable. And of course, I just want to very quickly recognize a few persons in the room. As mentioned, Her Worship, the Mayor of Castries, Geraldine Lendor Gabriel. I'd just like to acknowledge her presence. Of course, Castries is very much front and center in terms of the housing crisis in St. Lucia. Those 11,400 unit deficit that we face, much of it is in fact in the north of the island, and so certainly the operations and support of the CCC in this regard is of course very important as a landowner and of course as a landlord as well. And of course I also want to recognize the head of the Citizenship by Investment Program, Mr. McLeod Emmanuel. Of course, no doubt lots of people will be looking at you to bring in some money to be able to achieve what countries like Dominica and St. Kitts are in fact doing in terms of their own CIP programs and directing that towards housing. And of course, there's so many faces in the room, and we will get an opportunity later on. We hope to be done by about 12:30, and there'll be a networking session where people can actually meet and greet and be able to network. So we hope that will happen very, very soon indeed. Now, of course, you heard from the Minister for Housing. At this point in time, we will be hearing from the individual who chairs the institute that is responsible for regulating building and development in St. Lucia. Of course, you heard the Minister mention, 53 homes on 1 acre of land. We have 152,000 acres of land in St. Lucia. And of course, all of that can't go into housing, no doubt about it. You've got to have conservation as well. And so the individual who is responsible for regulating and looking at these issues in terms of building codes and planning codes and the tie-in, the environment that underpins the housing sector. Of course, he is the chairman of the Development Control Authority, Mr. Ignatius Jean. I'd like to welcome him to the podium at this time. Thank you. And just before Mr. Jean speaks, we'd just like to acknowledge that the Prime Minister has another engagement, and he, of course, has to leave at this time. But thank you so very much, Honourable Prime Minister, for joining us and presenting as well. Thank you. Mr. Jean.
Thank you, Calix. Minister for Housing, Chairman of the National Housing Corporation, distinguished members of the Diplomatic Corps, should I say all the rich people inside here? No, but all the professional associations and Her Lordship the Mayor, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And this is an honor for me as well to participate in this forum. But I think all of you have been sitting for quite a bit, so I will indulge you to stand a bit. And I would like you to repeat after me. With God as my guide.
With God as my guide.
I pledge allegiance to my country, St. Lucia.
I pledge allegiance to my country, St. Lucia.
I proclaim that I will serve my country with pride and dignity.
I proclaim that I will serve my country with pride and dignity.
And defend it with vigor and valor.
And defend it with vigor and valor.
In the pursuit of excellence.
In the pursuit of excellence.
Justice.
Justice.
And equality for all.
And equality for all.
Thank you very much. This is the National Pledge of St. Lucia. And I believe the work that we are doing here this morning, if we really follow and we read this National Pledge, we will be able to achieve all of what we set ourselves to do in this country. It is in my formative years as a member of the Vidbutai Cultural Club at Leclerc, we live by the club motto, valor bestows the capacity to conquer. Valor means great courage. This is an era which requires great courage in realizing the mantra of putting people first. Resolving the acute housing deficit is a monumental challenge, particularly during this austere and turbulent economic period, locally and globally. It requires great courage and discipline by all to ensure that we give opportunities and empower our people, and that no one is left behind. It requires great courage to seek other pathways to house the nation. So, I was asked to speak on the critical role of the Development Control Authority in the housing development. And I think very often people believe that the DCA is the big bad wolf in the house. We are not. The DCA is established by an Act of Parliament, the Land Development Interim Control Amendment Act of 1998, which establishes the Development Control Authority. And it says in Section 3(1), there is established by this Act a body corporate to be called the Development Control Authority. The board of the authority shall consist of a chairperson, a deputy chairperson, and 12 other members, all appointed by the cabinet to serve for a period not exceeding 3 years, and who shall all be eligible for a reappointment. So the DCA is not the chairman of the board. There is a board comprising 12 members. There is an executive secretary to the board who is also the Chief Physical Planning Officer, and who unfortunately, Minister, was not invited here to this important forum. But I do not walk without my Chief Technical Officer. Thank you very much. But I will communicate whatever the proceedings are this morning. But I want us to understand that the DCA is not the chairman of the board. We have a board and we work as a collective. My good friend Calix here is also a member of our board. So, by what authority do we act as the Development Control Authority? We act on the Physical Planning and Development Act, Cap 512 of 2005. So this is the authority that we have. And our objects, the objects and purposes of the Act are: 1, to ensure that appropriate and sustainable use is made of all publicly owned and privately owned land in St. Lucia in the public interest. B, maintain and improve the quality of the physical environment in St. Lucia, including its amenity. C, provide for the orderly subdivision of land and the provision of infrastructure and services in relation thereto. And D, to maintain and improve the standard of building construction so as to secure human health and safety. And E, to protect and conserve the natural and cultural heritage of St. Lucia. I think we're perhaps a little better known for that in recent times since we got on the board. So, the DCA is therefore a regulatory authority. We do not exist to stymie development, but rather to ensure the ordered development of our homeland. Physical planning, or town planning as is said in some jurisdictions or by some professionals, has been defined as the science and art of shaping and guiding physical growth of communities in harmony with social and economic needs. Another definition is that physical planning as an orderly spatial arrangement of the various land uses such as residential, industrial, commercial, recreation and open space, transportation, public infrastructure, and other ancillary activities. It seeks to achieve functionality and compatibility among various land uses. There is no doubt that in the absence of effective planning, development is likely to be haphazard and disjointed without regard for planning principles or putting of land to its best use in the interests of the community. Many defects are apt to arise from unplanned development, such as waste, congestion, disharmony, undesirable mixing of incompatible uses, lack of social services, and unnecessary loss of good quality agricultural land. And that is one I'm very passionate about. At the DCA, we are directly concerned with the requirements of various land uses, their distribution, and the relationship between them. And you may realize that in controlling land use, it gets a little scary that we are controlling people as well. It is our fervent hope as a DCA board that the need for physical planning at all levels in our country will become more generally recognized owing to the many challenges we confront today, including the skewed demographics towards the northern part of the island, urban drift, urban sprawl that consumes prime agricultural lands, road traffic increasing at an increasing rate. And of course, if you look at Port Castries any week or every month, we probably have at least 2 boatloads of cars imported into the country. Acute housing deficit, as cited by the Minister, and the urgent need for urban renewal. Skillfully prepared and imaginative plans are a sine qua non if these numerous problems are to be resolved satisfactorily. We must be imaginative and visionary to anticipate the changing patterns and conditions in the country. We need to track the demographic, social changes, lifestyle changes, for example, how people live, work, and play today. These approaches must be evidence-based. Estimates of population change, size of households, changing patterns of employment, forms of transport, leisure activities, all need to be catered for in the whole planning process for our country. So in essence, the role of the DCA is to ensure that all development is coordinated with an eye into the future and carried out in such a way that it will assist in producing a community environment that will advance human welfare in health, well-being, and safety. The results of DCA interventions should lead to effective teamwork on the part of the professions involved, which include engineers, architects, surveyors, as well as geographers, economists, sociologists, bankers, financiers, healthcare planners, environmentalists, agriculturalists, etc., etc., etc. The skills required are so diverse that no one individual or profession could possibly possess them all. This is why the DCA welcomes this opportunity to be part of this consultative process. The DCA is here to give guidance to developers in the public and private sectors on requirements and processes to comply with the Physical Planning and Development Act. And of course, the processes include making your submissions on time in a timely manner and giving lead time. And very often we have, both from the public and private sector, applications are placed at the DCA yesterday, and tomorrow morning the chairman gets a call about where is it, or somebody calls the minister to say that we are delaying the application. That cannot work, because the technical teams must go in and do their appraisals, they must do the physical site visits, and to do the due diligence, we must follow due process. And in many of these cases, if we do not follow due process, we risk being litigated as well. But there is a process, and we must comply with the processes. If we are going to undertake projects of the magnitude of trying to provide housing for as many people, we must give ourselves lead time so that we can do whether the site will require doing the environmental impact assessment. You must give yourself time to get that work done by the professionals. The architects will do their designs. They will have to get things into the DCA, and some matters may not be ready for being presented to the board, so that we have encouraged our technical staff to work closely with developers and their representatives. So if there are matters that are not ready to get to the board, don't take it to the board, because we don't want to waste time and send it back and defer it to go and get it done. So you engage them and say, you, Mr. Architect, we are missing some of this information. You fix this, and then we're going to take it to the board for approval. So we save on time, but give yourselves lead time. So the other thing is that permission is required to develop land in this country. And the law also is abundantly clear on this. Subject to this act, a person shall not commence or carry out the development of any land in St. Lucia without the prior permission of the head of the Physical Planning and Development Division, which is really the Development Control Authority. And development includes residential buildings, commercial, industrial, subdivision of land, change of land or building use, repairs and renovations to existing buildings, erection of tents, display of advertisements, signs and billboards, quarrying operations, hotel and tourism operations, retaining walls, garages, etc., etc. So we have a little guidance here for residential development, and to take into consideration Location. A suitable location is a basic determinant of the success or failure of a residential development. A prerequisite of all types of development is that the conditions of the location provide a healthy environment and include land suitable for the erection of building structures and the installation of infrastructure. If the conditions of land proposed as a location for development does not meet the basic criterion, the developer must provide written outline accompanied by drawings and the documents, if necessary, of the steps to be taken to bring the land to a suitable permanent state for the proposed development. Provision of roads and utilities must be provided by the developer that meets the prescribed standards. Developers are advised to fully and objectively assess the suitability of the area they are considering developing before becoming fully committed to a particular location. Location characteristics that should be considered include the exposure to the risk of natural hazards, including flooding, instability, etc., the topography of the land in terms of the suitability for residential development and standard requirements, and economic the compatibility of land use and physical that we have cases where people are looking for places to live to get cheap deals on land, and that land some of those lands may be next to a farmer who is running a piggery. And then you buy the land cheaply, you build next to a piggery, but now you want the farmer to shut down because it's a nuisance. So all of these have to be taken into consideration when we make decisions. We have to consider the road network in which the proposed site is situated and the feasibility for connecting into existing networks. And that is a function where we collaborate with the Ministry of Infrastructure. The availability of public transportation, for example, how easy accessible it is to minibuses or taxis to allow mobility for residents who do not own motor vehicles. The actual demand for the type of housing being proposed and the supply of housing in similar adjacent developments. Employment opportunities in the area. Zoning regulations affecting the site under consideration, particularly density limitations. All of which we have the guidelines, of course. We have these, and there you could find it on the DCA site. This is online, and we keep updating it regularly. In fact, we're in the process of updating those guidelines and some of our regulations, which we have not yet done. The availability of schools, services, and commercial establishments for daily shopping needs, medical services, pharmaceutical services. The availability of utility services, particularly water and sewage, electricity and telecoms. And I say water because we have had applications from developers wanting to locate. They have land and they want to make some money. And that's good. But it will not be good for the DCA to approve a development well knowing that WASCO does not have the capacity to supply water to these households. This is the biggest investment a young person will make for the rest of their working lives. And you start up with a young family, and imagine a young family has no water in the household, and you have babies and there's no water. You now cannot blame WASCO for that. So the DCA has a responsibility to be sure that you get it right with WASCO and the health services. And for example, this concept that we are speaking of this morning, it will be important that we consider sewage and sanitation systems. Because I know of other jurisdictions where they have gone into multiple family dwellings and they are already encountering problems with sewage and sanitation services. So, Minister, I urge you and your team to bear all of this in mind and consult the relevant authorities in making those decisions. The other one is that of the potential nuisances in the area, noise or activities which are not compatible to residential use. And of course, in coastal areas, the setback which will be required from the high water mark. Ultimately, the goals of proper physical planning will redound to building the resource base of our economy, strengthen economic opportunities, and housing definitely will encourage, will foster. If we have more construction work, it helps to sustain greater economic activity. The DCA has special interest in aesthetics and healthy living, environmental degradation, and some of the slums and so on that we're seeing developing because people have a need for proper housing, and we have to be able to rectify those. Aesthetic quality, especially visual quality of the built and natural environment, is one of the oldest goals of planning. So also is the concern for healthy and sanitary living conditions. We are all well aware of the drift of rural populations owing to the demise of the banana industry to places like Castries and Groseley, and who eventually remain unemployed for so long and in a desperate move to find shelter at least possible cost, settle down in some of the most deplorable, horrendous, and unaesthetic and unsanitary residential environments. We need to focus on this surge and escalation in urban poverty, and on how our physical plans can make development more sustainable, as well as enabling our country to expedite the progress to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and Sustainable Development Goal 11.1, Safe and Affordable Housing. Our planning processes are intended to use the collective intelligence and foresight to chart direction, order, and harmony, and progress in public activities relating to the human environment and general welfare. We strive to develop as a broad base of economic activities as our natural and human resources can economically sustain. Ultimately, what we strive for is balanced and harmonious national development. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman of the Development Control Authority, Mr. Ignatius Jeff, of course also former Minister for Physical Development, for sharing with us today the guidelines, so to speak, and the boundaries and do's and don'ts, of course, of development. Very, very important, no doubt. Now, we are trying to be out of here by 12:30, so you can go to your lunch dates and what have you. But before we do that, we have a very short rendition, and it is going to be done by Miss Isian Dolce. I hope I get the first name correct. And then we will head into our Q&A session, where we'll have a panel to answer some questions, and we can have some interaction on the many interesting proposals that we've seen thus far. So I'd like to now invite Ms. Dolce to be able to give us that lovely rendition.
to 10. Feel the earth move and then hear my heart burst again. For this is the end. I've drowned and dreamt this moment. So overdue I owe them. Swept away I'm stolen. When the sky falls and it crumbles, we will stand tall and face it all together. When the sky falls and it crumbles, we will stand tall and face it all together at skyfall. That skyfall. Skyfall is where we start. 1,000 miles and balls apart, where worlds collide and days are dark. You may have my number, you can take my name, but you'll never have my heart. When the sky falls and it crumbles, we will stand tall and face it all together. When the sky falls, when it crumbles, we will stand tall and face it all together at skyfall. And it crumbles, we will stand tall. When the sky falls and it crumbles, we will stand tall. Where you go, I go. What you see, I see. I know I'll never be me without the security. Your loving arms keeping me from harm. Put your hands in my hand and we'll stand. When the sky falls and it crumbles, we will stand tall and face it all together. When the sky falls and it crumbles, we will stand tall and face it all together at skyfall. When the sky falls, we will stand tall at skyfall.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Isian Dolce, about standing tall. And of course, I'm not sure if Mr. Frederick decided that, his tall buildings need to be standing tall. And so that's the idea there. So maybe that's why she was selected to give that lovely rendition indeed. At this point in time, we are going to be having a panel discussion, a quick Q&A. So, of course, this will be an opportunity for some interaction. I'd like to welcome, in addition to the individuals already present at the head table, first, Mrs. Sidonia Sidoni Volny. She is the Managing Director of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation. And I'd like to welcome her to the head table, as well as Mr. Didas Fede, I believe I'm seeing him there, to welcome him forward as well to join the panel. Now, this is an opportunity for some questions and answers. If you've got any questions for the National Housing Corporation, of course, or for the minister, or maybe for the chair of the Development Control Authority, this would be the great opportunity to be able to do so. I believe I'm seeing, are you in charge of the mic back there? No, you're not the roving mic. But we need somebody. But of course, if you just put up your hand, if you've got a question or a comment or anything of the sort, we can actually go straight to you. There's a mic available. Of course, if you've got a powerful voice, you can stand and speak wherever you are. Of course, what we've seen thus far is very important in terms of the whole issue of affordability. And I think that is the big challenge around the world right now. In the United Kingdom, they're facing a housing crisis because of a lack of investment in social housing for a number of decades. So what you saw in the 1940s and 50s and 60s and 70s did not continue. And so we find a number of countries, both developed and developing, facing very difficult times in terms of affordable housing. And the big question is, what is that magic figure? That's another thing that we should certainly be thinking about. And based on one study on housing that had been done, I believe 64% of the population can only achieve a maximum mortgage of $1,320 a month. So, or a total mortgage of about $180,000. So that's really the target you may want to be thinking about at this point in time. So again, I'd like to welcome the floor to anybody who has any comments or any questions. I think we have one. I recognize the face despite the mask, Mrs. Andrea St. Rose. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Under the condominium legislation, there's provision for a management company to run the condominium setup. And maintenance costs tend to be a bit on the high side. I'm wondering...
Mrs. St. Rose, I think they want you to stand so that you could be more visible for the camera, I believe. Is that what it is? You can also take off your mask as well, I think.
That's okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I was saying that the condominium legislation makes provisions for a condominium management company, so to speak, to maintain the property. In light of increasing costs, I'm wondering what consideration has been given, in particular in dealing with the common costs, such as insurance, maintenance, etc.
Mr. Minister, you want to tackle that one?
Let me answer.
I think so.
Well, certainly that aspect of it has been looked at. NHC is involved in construction and maintenance. In fact, they maintain what we colloquially refer to as all the CDC buildings. It is not new to them. Insurance, yes, we will be taking insurance out on the entire property. But persons can take insurance on their individual possessions. All of those I's will be dotted and the T's will be crossed. But definitely it is something we have addressed our minds to in terms of maintenance and insurance on the properties. So it is not gone without thought. The details will be worked out. They have not been worked out because we are yet basically to ascertain what the cost will be with such fluctuation occurring at this time. But we do know of 1, insurance, 2, maintenance.
Thanks very much for that response, Honourable Minister. I see another question from Mrs. Alcindor at this time. Thank you.
From our very ambitious high-rise with the 53 units on 1 acre of land, I have 3 questions. Accessibility through the various levels, the sewer plan for such a facility, and what are the sustainable water conditions set within that facility to augment the so frustrated situation of Wasco, I think water and sewage, as it relates to these facilities, should be a consideration because the already constrained infrastructure of Wasco would be put under more strain. So I want that question answered for me. Thanks.
Right. So, Mr. Feder, you want to tackle this about whether the person on the 5th floor will be able to have enough water pressure, maybe?
Good morning. I know. Yeah, all the designs in terms of our construction, we were looking at the cistern water storage, using at the basement, the ground floor level, the basement level, or the foundation level as a cistern storage. Accessibility in all the designs, they will make provisions for the differently able people. There will also be access by elevators to get people up and down. And what was the third question? The sewer. In terms of the sewer, there are a number of options. One that was being discussed privately at this point in time, but we have not finalized as yet, would be using, I think there is what's the organization? The WASA is exploring the possibility of using the wetland sewage management treatment. That's a possibility that can be explored. There's also the private establishment of your own private sewer treatment, and where possible, there will be direct connection onto the existing sewer system. That's okay?
So how advanced is your collaboration with Wasco? Because that would be a serious consideration for Wasco. Whether you have the system store water and provide water to those units, that is one thing, but Wasco would have to be integral because Wasco as a company is one of the sole companies providing that level of that utility to the country. So I'm saying, how advanced are you with Wasco as it relates to those units, so Wasco can incorporate that into their main plan and their sustainable plan for the future?
Okay, if you take our example today, which is what is happening here today, is our intention to involve stakeholders in every process. That every step of the way. And as we move forward and the input becomes necessary, we will then get through with Wasco at the different stages. As you were told, Mr. Jamal and his team are currently working on the final designs, the final cost. So all these things will be factored in at the appropriate time. But it is our intention to work closely with stakeholders, to involve them. As a matter of fact, if I could just go beyond the construction, period, it's our intention that once we start to do the pre-selling and people start to buy, is to have meet and greet activities where potential tenants will socialize and to build that kind of camaraderie. Our intention is not to sell a building, is not to sell what you refer to, as Minister said, the colloquial, the CDC buildings. We're selling a lifestyle, we're selling a vision, we're selling a dream. You know, we want to sell community, a new community. And that is why you would see in our buildings the supermarket, the small grocery shop, the other facilities that are required. So you are seeing that is the approach we are taking. In terms of the minister spoke briefly to the management, the insurance and stuff. If I could just maybe just rush into an example for you. If we are looking at putting covenants in place, what the covenants would look like for that kind of building, what kind of what is necessary, what is the management structure, what is going to happen, and what you're going to see. Say, for example, if the building is being sold on a rent-to-own concept, and somebody is being asked to pay, say, like $800 a month, we can then say, for example, $600 of your money can go towards the principal amount that you owe. $50 can go to the general insurance, and $50 can go to general maintenance. We are also factored in to show you how advanced we are in our planning and looking at the real life scenarios. What we are looking at, COVID just happened, we're still in the pandemic. People lost their jobs. We are also saying there may be a possibility for us to say, even while you're paying on your principal, we can take a small percentage of that and set it aside, although it will eventually go to your principal. But in the event that you have lost your job, you have some money set aside that you can meet your obligations for a couple months. So it's not just something we just thinking of out of the blue. It's something that we are putting a lot of thought into. a lot of getting information from a lot of people, sharing experiences, like personal experiences we had working and living in other countries. So it's all factoring into it. So it's going to be a real comprehensive approach towards the implementation of this project.
I do understand, but I want to come back and not sound like I'm being a pain.
No, not necessarily.
I'm saying that all of these plans you said are well on their way. They're comprehensive plans, we understand. When these plans are actualized, there will be resource implications for the utilities that go into them.
Yes.
Wasco, Lucilec, and whatever. How far are you? Because there needs to be some synchronizing with Wasco, Lucilec, and all the other utilities to ensure that we do not put excessive resource constraints on them when these projects have to be actualized and implemented. So Wasco now, or Lucilec now, should be in the process of making provision for those projects. So I'm saying, how far are we with these utility companies so that we ensure that when these things come to fruition, we do not have the hiccups of we have a system, but what is the sustainable, or what is the collaboration between the system that you want to introduce and Wasco? What is the collaboration between the system you want to introduce and Lucilec? Are we going to use alternative energy? All of these things are considerations that we need to have because they have significant cost implications going forward.
Yes.
The plant, the minimization or the minimized cost of acquiring the unit is one thing, but the sustainable and the forward costing of living or being able to access that product to ensure that it does not get ruined has to be taken into consideration. So it doesn't make sense to have a facility where you say you're going to give people affordable housing. True. But remember, these are vulnerable people with low income. So you have to ensure that the systems, the utilities that they use are also affordable.
Okay.
And if the utilities used are affordable, then you'd have achieved your objective by providing them with a reasonable apartment or housing, and also ensuring that you have a facility that they can continue to maintain. That's important.
Okay. Like we said, when you're doing a project, right, you would do your stakeholder analysis, and then you would decide when it is necessary for different inputs to be included. Of course, in doing your stakeholder analysis, you will know there is a point of consultation when you would have to liaise with the different agencies. Second, if you look at our buildings, we spoke about the cisterns. Of course, there will be rainwater harvesting mechanisms. There will be consultation with Wasco once our designs are finalized in terms of capacity and water. Like I said, we have already discussed also preliminary the exploration of the wetlands management. So it tells you that we are forward thinking in our approach to this process. In terms of telling you how far we are in this process, I have not done a scale as to where we're supposed to be, so I can't tell you how far, but I know we are consulting the appropriate people, and we can't go to Wasco unless we finalize that our design, just 1 second, that our design, we know, for example, the average household consumes 65 gallons of water a day. The average family size is about one male, female, two people. So if you assume each household will have 4 people, then you can arrive at what your water consumption is. You can also arrive that you would basically need a 10-day water supply. So until you can determine exactly your capacity need, then you can't go to Wasco and just talk. You need to be able to decide what would be your water capacity need, and then you can go to Wasco to decide what is it you want. In terms of affordability, the rent to own, if you look at current markets, and we have bankers here, we're talking about mortgages range from what, 5.9% going upwards. The banks require, what is it, 5.9%? Right, range from 5.9% upwards. The banks require the 60-40 ratio. The studies are telling you that most of the people who will need that kind of housing already committed, that most of the salaries already committed, that they would never be able to meet the 60-40 ratio that the banks require. So the rent-to-own concept, so I'm telling you this to tell you the level of investment we have made in analyzing the market, analyzing the needs, and analyzing what is required to deliver the service. So it's not something where we are just deciding we're going to build houses and we're going to build houses for 4 people. There is an in-depth analysis. The 2014 household study said 11,465 houses are required to meet the housing shortage. You understand? We have a census going on now, which will basically update that figure. So I'm saying that we are not just doing this in absence of what's happening in the economy. We are doing this and being fully aware of what is taking place in the economy, analyzing the needs of the people. If you look at, for example, currently a gas station worker is paying rent $800 a month. In a rent-to-own concept, $800 a month, average rent, $800 a month to an apartment she'll never own. In the rent-to-own concept, she simply takes that $800 and put it into something that she can own. So there is no major adjustment in her spending because she was already committed that $800 to rent. So I'm saying we are coming up with the concepts after analyzing the environment and understanding what is required. So I say this to say that WASCO will be consulted when it's appropriate. All the factors that you mentioned there, Lucia will be consulted when it's appropriate. But we need the information. Of course, when you go into consultation, there must be some information that you have to provide up front. And we are in the process of developing that. And everybody will be consulted.
All right, thank you very much for the question, Mrs. Alton. A very pertinent question indeed. I think what is important as well, if I just may add very quickly, is the issue of location. And you've got to decide where you actually have the capacity already in place, in particular in terms of utilities, to be able to actually provide those services. So there may be areas that you already have, let's say in the north, where you actually have a sewage system in place already. That would be clearly an ideal place to do so because you don't have to take on the additional costs of developing these lovely wetland areas, even though I like wetlands, but to be able to support that. So I think location matters. And that's part of the challenge that we have because people don't have good locations. They have to therefore forced into higher elevations where it becomes a lot more difficult to be able to provide access to those utilities. And then it becomes more of a cost overall to the utility companies and whatnot. I think I see Mr. DeVoe's hand over there, so could we get him the mic, please? And yes, of course, and I'd like to re-welcome the Honorable Emma Hippolyte. She was here earlier on, and she's brought a few friends along. The Honorable Joachim Henry, I think we caught a glimpse of him in the image of the video we played. Of course, very passionate regarding his, from a professional background in terms of the housing and building sector, and also the Honorable Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Industries, Mr. Gibeon Ferdinand. Welcome, and thanks for joining us here. And like we said, we want to finish within by 12:30. So, but of course, Mr. DeVoe, please go right ahead.
George, thank you. I do want to commend the organizers for putting this on. I think it's a good idea. But I do have a few concerns. I may sound a little rambling, but when I listen to the preliminary figures, it sounds like per unit of one of these high-rises is going to be in the region of $180,000. A mortgage to afford that, somebody has to be making in the region of $3,000 a month. Now, okay, it could be plus or minus. I'm not going to get into details, and that's fine. But you also said later on that 64%, I think you said, of people in St. Lucia can afford that sort of mortgage payment, $1,300 a month. So what happens here, 36%? We haven't addressed that here this morning at all. And I thought we were talking about affordable housing for all, not just for a certain layer. One other point I want to make is that, yes, it was pointed out that the high-rise we're talking about, it would cost $10 million versus a conventional building, which may cost $15 million. However, it'd be interesting to do the economics of the whole exercise, because I would suggest that the $10 million money is basically going to go right back out of St. Lucia. Yes, there'll be some employment and so on. But with the traditional method of building, which may cost more, I think that money is going to rotate and stay within our economy, and therefore it'd be interesting to look at the pros and cons of those two variables. Thank you.
Yep. Very vital points indeed. Thanks very, very much for that contribution, Mr. DeVoe. Any responses? I'm not sure if anybody wants to respond to this, but very much spot on. And of course, I think we see a A hand over there, yes, okay. Sure, please, thank you.
Good morning, all.
Morning.
Okay, so I tried to do a little bit of maths here, right? As you said, your payment structure comes up to about $1,020 a month if you went to a bank. Okay? So it's within what you're saying. However, if I get this right, you are looking for somebody to partner with you or with government to build this thing. What's in it for them? Because at $10 million divided by 53, I don't make a profit. So what's in it for them? And if you're using a moratorium over the building period and afterwards, you're increasing your costs through interest costs to the bank. How are you going to pay that? Have you considered that?
No, you can stay there. I don't think we are asking any lending institution to operate at a loss, which is what I said earlier. But I'm saying that given the social responsibility that we all are trying to discharge jointly, then one can play with the figures as it relates to interest. So if, for example, your bank decides, okay, the contractor, yes, but that's what I'm saying. But obviously, the contractor bills, but the money comes from a lending institution unless the contractor decides to construct and finance. So that's a totally different model. The model of the institution financing will tell us, well, okay, we're going to lend you $10 million. You have 2 years to pay. You'll pay us X amount. We now work on our end to ensure we discharge that financial responsibility to our lender, from whom we borrow the funds. So basically, we don't expect interest will be factored in. So when I say that at the cost, interest is a cost of doing business. The money has a cost. Today's value is not tomorrow's value. So all of those things have to be incorporated. Even in doing something, expending $1 million does not mean it costs you $1 million. It is your expenditure, but on top of that, there would be administrative costs, which probably does not come to you in the form of direct expenditure of cash, but time, professional involvement. So all of this have to be worked out in determining the lowest price that we could give our people.
All right, thanks very much, Honourable Minister. Do we have any other questions? Okay, right, go right ahead. Please. Just for the record, could you just use the mic is coming to you. Thank you.
No, I was just saying whether you could share that proposal with the financial institutions and other stakeholders to come back to you. Because I think it's a new concept and people have to buy into it. So I think it's important that we do that.
Thanks very much, Mr. Bobra. And if I just may add as well, I can't speak for the NHC, but I know how it tends to work in a number of other jurisdictions. The entire complex is not necessarily affordable housing. You quite often have part of the complex being affordable, but other parts we'll actually have to put it out at commercial rates so you can actually recoup a profit on some, and that is an effective cross-subsidy can actually happen. And of course, I'm answering your question for you, Mr. Minister. The other area too is the possibility, no doubt, of the commercial aspect of it as well. The commercial rental opportunity. So in terms of a mixed use.
It's a mixed use, but it's something new. It's a concept, and I think more people have to see it and give their views on that.
So hopefully soon we can get some more details from the NHC. Any other contributions? I know we have a number of a very wide cross-section of persons here, contractors, bankers, credit union, operators. Anybody who wants any other? Oh, I think we have a contribution over there. Ms. Richelo.
Yeah, I just have one question. See, I think it's a fantastic idea, but there's only one thing I noticed that has not been fully expanded on, and that is what are the major risks? Because it's a fantastic idea, but what do we foresee as the major risks, and what are the mitigating factors that we are taking into consideration?
Who would like to answer that question? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. First, my first question, risk for who?
For the banks, there is no risk.
I mean in terms of the risks of the project. So, for example, how do we ensure that there's not one person buying about 5 units?
No.
How do we ensure that the people who actually own the units are people who are qualified or within a certain income bracket, as opposed to somebody who can possibly afford it?
Yeah.
We're looking at people who cannot afford housing to be able to obtain one of those units. So what do we have in place, and what discussions are being held in terms of mitigating those risks?
Okay. Before anybody actually, especially in the rent-to-own apartments, right? Like I said, we are currently developing covenants, and we are developing the whole process. There's also going to be a detailed application process, which pretty soon will be available online. Like, we are moving everything online. You'll soon be able to apply for apartments. You'll soon be able to do everything online. So there will be a detailed application process. We're going to do the socioeconomic assessments that are required in terms of identifying whether the person meet the necessary qualification, the qualifications that have been established. And there's going to be a process that is going to ensure that in our covenants, like in our guidelines and everything, that you cannot buy more than one apartment. And if you are selling before your time, you have to come back to the NHC, rather than just you being able to sell directly to anybody. If you have not fully paid off your building as yet.
And if you own a home, you can't.
And if you own a home, you can't buy one of these apartments. So we are going to have a detail. Like I said in a previous discussion, it's a process that is more detailed than we're telling you here today, because there's a lot of work being done in terms of what is going to be the structure, how it's going to happen, how are we going to identify the beneficiaries, how are the beneficiaries going to be, the person is going to be selected, the buyer is going to be selected, what you can do after you have purchased an apartment and you're still paying for it, a condominium and you're still paying for it. There's a lot of things that are going to be, like you're going to see happen with as we move on to the rolling out this. You're also going to see in the coming weeks, we're going to have these we just recently selected a marketing firm. We're going to do the road shows, going community to community, having sensitization, doing these things that the NHC never did before, in terms of ensuring that people around the country are aware. Because this is not just a housing project for Castries. This is for all the communities, and our intention is to at least at some point in time get to the point where we have at least one of these buildings in almost every single community, every single constituency. Did I answer your question?
Any other questions before we wrap up at this point in time? I'm not sure if we're seeing any more. Oh, yes, another contribution, please.
What are we doing for affordable housing for those 36%?
Okay. It's not really, you said 36%. Oh, those are the persons who can afford over the amount, eh? So you're talking about the 64% who cannot afford beyond that 1,300.
The 30-something who can't afford.
No. Like I said earlier, you're talking about the 36% that don't meet the qualifying criteria for a mortgage. And this is where the rent-to-own concept and the detailed qualification criteria comes in, because we can now expose them to the rent-to-own concept. You spoke about costs. In terms of us doing just preliminary cost analysis, we have determined at this stage already what will be the rental cost per square foot on the ground floor. That's just with preliminary figures to show you. Like I said, it's a detailed process, a very detailed process in terms of our analysis. I can tell you, I will not tell you, but we know We know offhand what the unit cost per square foot should be at this point in time to allow us to recoup our expenses based on, for the commercial space, based on what we plan to rent the apartments. That's just working with current figures. So I'm telling you this to tell you that our process is very detailed, and I understand the question that you asked, and I appreciate it because it allows us to provide the clarification. But this is a very detailed process, and I don't want to step out on a limb, but I think I can safely say it is more detailed than any process that you have ever seen happen in terms of government housing in St. Lucia. Did I satisfy you?
All right, thanks very much for that. Oh, yes.
Yeah, just to attempt to respond to the question asked. Yes, thank you, and my apologies for being late. We were in another ceremony. Just to attempt to Mr. Devo's question, we understand that the menu for housing is very, very complex. Not everybody can consume the same kind of house. So we have the social housing assistance program where we respond to a number of persons who cannot fit within that bracket. So that is what you see happening. We've done this a number of years ago where we continue to serve a number of persons that fall within the last quintile of our poverty strata, the last 20%. And now because of economic shocks, you find that the two quintiles, almost 36 to 40% of our population, cannot go to the bank, cannot go to a lending institution, and therefore our response for our social housing assistance program provide relief to these individuals. Some of it you could see happening. It's been criticized, but of course they are happy. We are providing shelter to them.
All right, thanks. Thank you very much for that. And of course, the principle of equity means that you will have to do more for some than others to be able to actually meet that threshold. I'm not sure that we have any further contributions, but just very one quickly, Ms. Dixon.
Thank you. I'm Kristen Deason with the Global Green Growth Institute, and thank you so much for all the presentations. Very interesting. I wanted to follow on an earlier question from over here about utilities, because I think that affordability is an important consideration, not just in purchasing the property and being able to pay a mortgage, but also in the case of utilities. So on the electricity side, are you planning any design components in the design of the building to ensure that electricity costs are minimized for the residents?
In answering the question, I left this part out. You're going to see solar panels on the top of the building, the same way you're going to see the water harvesting and stuff like that. And we are going to explore different opportunities that are provided to allow us to use alternative means of energy where possible. So forgive me for not adding that in answering my question, but thank you for bringing it up.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much for that question. Very important, of course, at this point in time. A couple of years ago, a solar panel was at about $1.50 US a watt. All right, it's now down to about 20 cents a watt, and it's continuing to drop. So certainly, I think we have to consider the issue of incorporating renewable energy into these projects, and of course, energy efficiency as well. I think we are out of time, and we have just enough time for the vote of thanks. And I'm going to invite Mrs. Sidoni Volney at this time. She's the General Manager of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation to do the closing remarks.
Pleasant afternoon to all. It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the protocol already established. The Honorable Philip G. Pierre, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Development and Youth Economy. The Honorable Richard Frederick, Minister in the Prime Minister's Office, responsible for housing and local government. Honorable Emma Hippolyte, Minister of Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs. Honorable Joachim Henry, Honorable Gideon Ferdinand, Honorable Jeremiah Norbert, Your Worship, Geraldine Lendor Gabriel, Mayor of Castries, Permanent Secretaries, Ministry of Housing and Local Government, Dr. Cordelia Lynn Ambrose, Permanent Secretary of Sustainable Development, Ms. Anita Montoot, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Economic Development, Mr. Claudius Emmanuel. Other permanent secretaries, the Ambassador of the Republic of China on Taiwan, Honorable Peter C.Y. Chen, and Third Secretary, Ms. Elsa Tai, Mr. Ignatius Zhe, Chairman DCA, managers of financial institutions and credit unions, representatives of corporate St. Lucia, members of the Bar Association, other professional organizations, members of the Board of Directors of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, the staff of the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, senior government officials, other distinguished and invited guests, media personnel, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to convey sincere gratitude to all stakeholders who made this event possible. The Board of Directors, the Ministry of Finance for this lovely venue, and our sponsors, Sandal St. Lucia and Blue Waters. I would like to also thank Mr. Calix George Jr. for co-chairing us through this event, our co-chair, Dr. Cordelia Lynn Ambrose, the Permanent Secretary of the Department of Housing, for providing thoughtful insights and keeping us informed and scheduled for this auspicious event. Indubitably, we would like to express our sincere appreciation in all who joined us for this forum. Thank you to the Honorable Prime Minister for your presentation, the keynote speaker, the Honorable Richard Frederick, the staff at the National Housing Corporation and the Department of Housing and Local Government, Mr. Ignatius Jaw, Chairman of the Development Control Authority, Ms. Ignia Dulcie for the rendition, to our presenters, moderators, panelists, and our invited guests. We are so grateful for your engaged participation in today's discussions. Moreover, it's encouraging to see those who have played a pivotal role in the housing industry and have supported affordable housing initiatives. The momentum for transformation within this industry is expanding. It has also been invigorating to meet stakeholders who are new to affordable housing. As new strategies emerge in the market, invaluable experiences and perspectives are being brought forward. The group that has convened here today is a reflection of the diversity of the industry. We have persons who have traveled from all corners of the globe to be here today, from all corners of St. Lucia, and we are very grateful for this. I am reminded of the tenacity of St. Lucia, the open-minded approach to circumvent challenges, and the willingness to share experiences in order to learn from each other. We envisage learning from one another's experiences as we have explored a number of issues that have the potential to drive the industry forward. Firstly, general interest in participation in this forum was colossal. Secondly, there was a general understanding and appreciation for the roles at play in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We need private investors to fill critical gaps in the coming years to realize our affordable housing goals. As we have heard from the various presenters this morning, we need to rapidly accelerate progress if we are to fill our roles in this global initiative. Lastly, how can we recruit the guide of next wave of investments? If affordable housing market is to achieve scale, we need to ensure that investors from across the investment spectrum are effectively infiltrating the markets. We need to rapidly accelerate if we are to achieve the large-scale impact that the country needs. The true test of success of this forum will be the work done after we leave, when the conversations are over and we are starting and we are learning and acting on what we have learned. The government of St. Lucia, the Ministry of Housing, and the St. Lucia National Housing Corporation is committed to increasing the scale and effectiveness of affordable housing in St. Lucia. Progress has the potential to dramatically accelerate the growth and economic benefits. But as you've heard repeatedly through the conference, the progress we make in the coming months needs to be multiples of what we have accomplished in the last decade. Linear growth will not be enough. We need exponential growth. We need to distill a vision for where affordable housing industry needs to be in the next 10 years and determine strategies to get us there. The groundwork that we are doing right now, it will just prepare us for things to come. It will determine the trajectory of the housing market. We will work together to create and share a roadmap to drive forward the next stage of this vision for development. I am proud of all of our values, but there's one specific value that resonates through my core, and I think it speaks to some of the themes we've learned here at this forum. In summation, it is proverbial that the development of the housing sector remains one of the government's key priorities. And to this end, we continue to focus our efforts on harnessing the potential of the housing sector, not only for our country's GDP growth, but also in stimulating the economy and job creation. Moreover, it's not only about improving the housing stock, it's about affordability. It's about creating deep impact. It's about climate resiliency. We can't lose sight of how important it is for us to be thoughtful and intentional in our approaches, but also decisively, we must be ambitious in action. What we achieve through this investment and financing forum for affordable housing is knowledge and information needed to help us push forth our strategic plans. In closing, I am now proud to conclude a fruitful investment and financing forum for affordable housing. While this conference has now come to an end, we continue to be a resource to you and this industry. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sidonia Childs-Volley, Managing Director of the National Housing Corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, we've actually now come to the end of the formal part of the proceedings. We're now moving on to the really important part, of course, which is the networking and the meet and greet and what have you, which is, of course, going to happen on the outside. There are refreshments available, I believe. And so we do encourage everybody to have a drink and sit around, chat a bit, and so that, really and truly now, the work is just beginning. And part of the challenge, of course, of that implementation deficit has to be tackled by everybody here present.